The indictment is under seal, but this investigation centered on a hush money payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels.
As Caroline Shively reports, reaction is pouring in from Mar-a-Lago to Congress.
Mr. Trump's attorneys say he committed no crimes, and they pledge to fight these charges in court. Authorities in New York City on high alert following the revelation a grand jury voted to indict former President Trump. The charges relate to a hush money payment made to adult film star Stormy Daniels.
It's a raw political prosecution. Now, the indictment may come out with a crime that none of us have heard of.
Accusations against Mr. Trump stem from his former attorney, Michael Cohen, paying Daniels $130,000 to remain quiet over an alleged sexual encounter with the former president. The grand jury was deciding whether Trump falsified business documents when his company reported the reimbursement to Cohen as legal expenses. Former President Trump reacted in a statement, calling the indictment political persecution and election interference at the highest level in history. Most Republicans are rallying to his side.
I think this is going to backfire on the Democrats. And again, we know that Trump is a fighter. He leans into the fight. He's not going to go anywhere.
Democrats, meanwhile, are praising the move, arguing accountability is long overdue.
I would caution those who believe that President Trump is being politically persecuted here to not persecute our judicial and legal system.
Mr. Trump has vowed an indictment will not stop his 2024 presidential campaign. In Washington, Caroline Shively, Fox News.